Can the human mind withstand the weight of trauma? What happens when psychological decay becomes more than just a mental state? Can a person truly unravel in a single moment? A Psychological Shipwreck by Ambrose Bierce, reimagined in English, takes you on a dark psychological journey that will keep you hooked until the very last word. Join us on Classic Storytime Hub. Before we dive in, subscribe for your daily stories. Now, let's go. It was the summer of 1874 when I found myself in Liverpool. I'd traveled there on business, representing the New York-based firm Bronson & Jarrett. My name is William Jarrett, and my partner, Zenas Bronson, had been the backbone of the company. But last year, the firm collapsed. The fall from wealth to ruin was too much for him, and it killed him. With business wrapped up and the weight of exhaustion bearing down on me, I needed something to clear my mind. The idea of a long sea voyage, something that would give me space to breathe and recover, seemed like the perfect remedy. Instead of booking a passage on one of the sleek, crowded steamers heading back to New York, I chose something more solitary, an old sailing vessel, Morrow, that was heading back to the States. The ship was modest, and its accommodations were far from luxurious, but it suited me just fine. There were few passengers on board, myself, a young woman, and her companion, a middle-aged black woman. Oddly enough, the woman appeared to be her servant, which struck me as unusual for an English lady to travel with such a person. I'd later learned that the woman had come from a family in South Carolina. Both the man and woman who had originally accompanied her, a couple, had died on the same day in the home of the young woman's father in Devonshire. That alone was enough to stir my curiosity, but what followed was even stranger. During our conversations, the woman casually mentioned that the man who had died with his wife, her relatives, shared my name, William Jarrett. My heart froze. I knew little of the southern branch of my family, and this revelation hit me hard. What were the odds? A family connection that seemed far too coincidental to ignore? How could this woman, this stranger, be tied to me in a way that, until then, I had never known? The story of her family and of the mysterious man named William Jarrett was one that would haunt me for days to come. The Morrow set sail from the mouth of the Mersey on June 15th, and for weeks we were blessed with steady winds and clear skies. The captain was a capable seaman, but he was a man of few words, and he kept to himself, only joining us at meals. That left Miss Jeanette Harford and me to pass the time together, alone but never lonely. We became fast companions, almost inseparable, spending long hours talking on deck or sharing quiet moments below. I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward her. It was strange, a subtle magnetic force, like an invisible thread between us. But I couldn't put my finger on it, no matter how hard I tried. I wasn't in love with her, but there was something deeply unsettling about the way my mind was consumed by her presence. One evening, as we sat together on deck, I decided to voice my inner confusion. It was July 3rd, the air crisp with the promise of the coming storm, and I turned to her with a half-smile. "Can you help me resolve something, Miss Harford?" I asked lightly, trying to mask the depth of my thoughts. "I find myself intrigued by you in a way I can't quite explain." She fell silent, her gaze shifting downward, and for a moment I feared I had overstepped, said something too forward, too personal. Then, without warning, she lifted her eyes to meet mine. But the moment her gaze locked with mine, a chill crawled up my spine. It wasn't just her eyes I saw. It felt as though I was staring into something beyond her. Her eyes, deep and unblinking, felt like a portal, as though she wasn't merely looking at me, but through me. And there, far beyond the depths of her gaze, I could see them. Figures, men, women, children, faces flickering in and out of focus. They weren't merely reflections, but something else entirely, pressing forward, striving to look at me through her eyes, as if drawn by some invisible force. For a split second, I could almost hear their whispers, faint, indistinct, but filled with urgency. My mind reeled, and I couldn't shake the feeling that these faces, these unfamiliar but strangely familiar faces, knew me. What was happening? Was it a trick of the mind, or was there something deeper at play? The ship, the ocean, the sky, everything around me vanished. It felt as though I had been pulled into another world, a place where time and space no longer mattered. All I could see were the figures, those strange, shifting faces in the depths of Miss Harford's gaze. Then, as though the world had been smothered in darkness, a shift occurred. Slowly, like one adjusting to a dim light, my surroundings came back into focus. The deck, the masts, the ropes, all materialized again, like ghosts rising from the fog. Miss Harford sat before me, her eyes closed, her posture relaxed, sleeping, or pretending to. The book she had been reading rested in her lap, its pages fluttering with the faintest breeze. Something stirred within me, a strange compulsion. I couldn't resist. I glanced at the open page. It was a rare, peculiar text, Denneker's Meditations. Her finger, delicately poised, hovered over one passage. To some, it is granted to be drawn away, to depart from the body for a time. As streams may flow across one another, the weaker is carried by the stronger. So too, there are those of kindred spirit whose paths cross, their souls in company, while their bodies unknowingly follow separate paths. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. What was this? Why had she been reading such a thing? Just then, she stirred, her body jerking as if waking from a nightmare. She stood quickly, her face pale. The sun had just disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving an unnatural twilight hanging over us. The air was still, eerily still, not a single gust of wind. The sky was clear, but there was not a star to be seen. Suddenly, a hurried shuffle echoed across the deck. I turned to see the captain rushing up from below, joining the first officer at the barometer. "Good God!" I heard the officer mutter under his breath. His voice trembled with something urgent, something more than just a change in the weather. An hour later, I felt her, Miss Harford, slipping from my grasp, her form swallowed by the darkness and the furious spray of the ocean. The ship was sinking, and I could feel the pull of the waters dragging everything into the abyss. I was powerless against it. The last thing I remember was the chaos of the storm, the cold and the relentless churn of the sea. Then everything went black. I woke to the soft glow of a lamp, my head pounding, my body aching. I was lying in a bed, a familiar berth, the kind you find on a steamer. The rocking of the ship beneath me felt wrong, disjointed, but I couldn't place why. Across the room, a man sat on a couch, casually turning the pages of a book. He was dressed for bed, his face half obscured in the dim light. When I saw him, I recognized him immediately, Gordon Doyle. I'd met him in Liverpool just before I set sail. He was on his way to join the city of Prague, and he'd tried to convince me to accompany him. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, the disorientation still clouding my mind. Finally, I spoke, my voice hoarse. "Doyle," I said, my eyes searching his. "Did they save her, Jeanette Harford?" At that, he looked at me, his expression shifting. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips, like he found something amusing, but his gaze quickly turned to something else. Puzzlement, maybe concern, but he didn't answer. He just stared at me, silent. I pressed on, my voice edged with confusion and anxiety. "You'll tell me after a while, won't you? I'm sure you'll tell me after a while." The silence between us stretched, heavy and uncertain. I needed to know. But before I could say anything more, I asked, "What ship is this?"
Doyle stared at me, his eyes narrowing. "The city of Prague," he said, his voice smooth but oddly detached. "It's been 3 weeks since we left Liverpool heading for New York. The shaft's broken, so we're barely crawling along. Your esteemed fellow passenger, Mr. Gordon Doyle, and right alongside him, Mr. William Jarrett, lunatic, bound for an unknown fate. These two have traveled together, but it seems that the time has come for them to part ways, as I, with great determination, throw the latter overboard. I shot upright, the room spinning. What do you mean? Have I been on this steamer for 3 weeks? Yes, almost exactly, he replied nonchalantly. Today's the 3rd of July. I was struggling to piece things together, the words feeling as if they were slipping through my mind like sand. But have I been ill? Why don't I remember? Ill? No, not at all, he said with a slight grin. Right as rain, never missed a meal. The laughter died in my throat. The confusion was suffocating, like a weight pressing down on my chest. Doyle, this doesn't make sense. There's something wrong here. Was I not rescued? Was I not pulled from the wreck of the Morrow? At that, Doyle's face shifted. His pale skin seemed to drain of color. He walked over to me, his fingers brushing against my wrist. For a moment, his touch was cold, and I could have sworn I felt a shiver crawl beneath my skin. Then he spoke, his voice calm but unsettlingly level. What do you know of Jeanette Harford? I flinched. I know enough, but first tell me what you know of her. Doyle's eyes held mine for a long moment, as if weighing his next words. Then he lowered himself back onto the couch, the air between us thick with something unspoken. Why not? It's hardly a secret, he said, almost with a shrug. I'm engaged to Jeanette Harford. We've been together for over a year now. Her family, one of the wealthiest in Devonshire. They didn't take kindly to our plans, so we eloped. He paused, the words hanging in the air. Or rather, we are eloping, because the very same day you and I walked to the landing stage to board this ship, she and her servant, her devoted servant, a woman from the south, passed us on their way to the Morrow. My heart pounded in my chest. Jeanette, my Jeanette was on that ship? It couldn't be. But Doyle's words were as chilling as they were clear. What was going on here? What was the truth?
She wouldn't agree to travel on the same ship as me, Doyle continued, his voice cool, but I could sense the tension behind it. It was better this way. She took a sailing vessel to avoid attention, to reduce the chance of being recognized. But now I'm worried. This cursed engine failure has us stranded, and if we're delayed any longer, the Morrow will reach New York before us. She'll have no idea where to go. I stayed motionless in my berth, hardly daring to breathe. The words lodged in my throat, thick with disbelief, but Doyle seemed too absorbed in his own thoughts to notice. After a moment of silence, he spoke again, almost as if trying to unburden himself. By the way, he said casually, Jeanette isn't really a Harford by birth. She's adopted. Her real mother died tragically, thrown from a horse during a hunt. Her father, mad with grief, took his own life the same day. No one came for the child, and after a certain time, the Harfords took her in. She's grown up believing she's their true daughter. The air in the room felt colder, heavier. I couldn't place why, but something about the way he spoke made my stomach twist with unease. Doyle, I whispered, trying to shake the fog from my thoughts. What is that book you're reading? Doyle didn't seem to hear the urgency in my voice. Oh, it's just a little thing, he said with a smirk. Denneker's Meditations. Quite a strange read, but Jeanette gave it to me. She had 2 copies. Want to take a look? Before I could respond, he tossed the book to me. It landed open in my hands, its pages fluttering with the weight of something ominous. My eyes were drawn immediately to a marked passage on one of the exposed pages. To those bound by blood, yet separated by fate, there are moments when the soul crosses paths unknowing and untold. And in these moments, the veils of time are thin, allowing the spirits to glimpse one another through the cracks of the world. I felt a cold shiver down my spine. The words seemed to mock me, to beckon me deeper into a mystery I was already drowning in.
The passage in the book stared up at me, its words curling like smoke in my mind. To some, it is granted to be drawn away, to be apart from the body for a time. For as streams may cross one another, the weaker is carried by the stronger. So too are there those of kin whose paths intersect in silence, their souls moving together while their bodies remain unaware, following their preordained paths. A cold shiver crept down my spine. "She has quite a peculiar taste in reading," I managed to say, forcing myself to sound casual, though my mind was reeling. "Indeed," Doyle replied, his voice strangely soft. "But now perhaps you'll enlighten me. How did you know her name? How did you know the ship she sailed on?" I paused, the weight of the question hanging in the air. My heart thudded in my chest, but I knew I had no choice but to speak the truth. "You talked about her, in your sleep," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "You told me everything." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something dark flicker in his eyes. But then he just smiled, a thin, almost imperceptible smile, and turned back to the book as if nothing had happened. A week later, we limped into the port of New York, the city of Prague slowly making its way into the harbor, as if the entire voyage had been a strange, fevered dream. The harbor lights were brighter than I remembered, but something felt off, wrong even. The morrow never arrived. No word, no sign, as if it had never existed.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.